I've got a great idea for a book.
Oh yeah?
It's about an author researching the witch trials of Essex, Matthew Hopkins, and the horrors of the over-superstitious 17th century society, and how it parallels her own life and relationships, revealing clues to her own heritage. She's haunted by a ghost, and there's an evil pipe, and that when you blow it, it releases a malevolent force, and some weirdo psychics, and all sorts of spooky things.
And the twist is that none of that has anything to do with the ending whatsoever.
What?
That sounds perfect! Have it on my desk by Monday.
What? Witch Hunt by Sid Moore is a part paranormal, part mystery thriller novel wrapped up as a modern-day ghost story. It follows Sadie Asquith, a journalist still reeling from the death of her mother, who embarks on her biggest challenge yet: to write a book. Not just any book, a book about the witch trials in 17th century Essex. However, it seems that the past is not as dead and buried as she'd thought, and there are those who would do anything to stop it from coming to light. Full disclosure, I read this book whilst I was away, and as it came from a little library type thing, I had to give it back, and therefore I don't have it with me. And whilst I wrote loads of notes, I did neglect to write down some important details like the names of characters, so please bear with me as we jump in. No prizes for guessing that. I'd like the premise of this. I do love a good ghost story, and I do love a mystery, and boy, do I love me some paranormal shenanigans. This book seemed to promise all of these and more. The main character who is trying to write a book, tick. Spooky goings on, tick. Oodles of information and research about witches, tick. I also appreciated the use of the environment to create suspense and lay an eerie tone. The sea views and the mists from the Essex coast, the creepy villages tucked away, the crumbling dungeons, all very good. I also like the fact that the author is trying to give us a different side to Essex. I think many of us who don't come from Essex only really think of it as the setting of Towie, a strange place where everyone is descended from Oompa Loompas.
Disgusting.
But Moore showed us a different version. The Essex filled with forests and grasslands, with a gorgeous coastline and heaps of history. And I did quite like that the main character, Sadie, was trying to actively fight the Essex girl stereotype with her columns. Although her comparisons between the Essex girl and the 17th century accused witches was tenuous. There were also a few things that felt cool, even if they were a bit random in the end, like the moths that helped Sadie solve clues occasionally. I liked it as a sort of harkening back to fairy tales where animals help worthy heroes, but in this it felt just a bit convenient. Style without the supporting substance, as it were, but unsupported style is still better than nothing at all, so... This book was not well written. It's not dreadful most of the time, but it didn't draw me in as much as it should have. The descriptions of the landscape were serviceable, but not breathtaking. The spooky scenes were... well, they certainly told me it was scary, but I didn't actually feel scared reading them. And the rest of it... the meat of the prose, shall we say, the action and the dialogue... well, there were a lot of lines that made me laugh, but we'll get to those. There were also a lot of allusions to what was going to happen, so the book was essentially written as a sort of memoir. But the author only remembered this sporadically, and her way of reminding the reader was to just say, "Little did I know," occasionally at the end of some chapters, which got very tired very quickly, and it just comes across as a really lazy way of adding tension. But it also removes any possibility of jeopardy for a couple of the characters, which actually lowers the tension. So, oops. Sid Moore also does my favourite thing of telling us stuff instead of showing us, like Sadie's relationship with the police officer, whose name I don't remember. They had a thing in the past, and it's meant to be implied that there's still something there, but... I'm sorry, claiming there was chemistry in the past is not a substitute for writing actual chemistry in the present. Sadie as a main character was sometimes alright, but mostly I just found her annoying. I thought she was very stuck up, and she doesn't come across as a great journalist. People don't really seem to want to talk to her, and she doesn't seem to ask very good questions. And when weird stuff happens, she doesn't record it at all. I mean, her computer starts acting up because... it turns out 17th century ghosts know how to use Facebook Messenger. And I get after the first time, you just sort of freak out and go, "Ooh, well, that's a bit weird, I'm not looking at that again." But the second time, I mean, Surely you'd be taking screenshots or photos on your phone, or at the very least writing down. But she doesn't do any of that. And the only reason she gets anywhere at all with her investigation is because people just sort of give her the right information immediately, or because she happens to meet the right person at a party she didn't want to go to, who does a bunch of research for no other reason than plot. Sadie is meant to be 33, but she acts very childish as well. I mean, literally in one scene she communicates with her stepmother in groans, like a teenager.
What? Kevin, where the hell have you been? What?
Not exactly endearing. There was a lot of effort made to isolate Sadie in a way, like a lot of people whose job it is to help people, like the police or train station employees and lifeguards, just sort of don't really seem that interested in helping her when she's clearly in distress. And everyone else is weirdly horrified by her choice of book topic, the Essex Witch Trials. Why? Again, I think it's to separate Sadie from them, to make her seem other, different, not like other girls, but it doesn't really make sense. I mean, I've written and researched some pretty weird stuff and no one has given me a, "Oh, you shouldn't be researching that" reaction. I mean, it's not like these people actually believe in witchcraft, and as far as they're concerned, it's just history. Not very nice history, but history nonetheless. It's all very forced. And to be honest, Sadie didn't really seem like a very good writer. We get the occasional extract from the book she's writing, and it's not good. It's very laid back in its writing style, which is fine for a fluffy magazine about celebrity gossip or whatever. But for a book about a very dark and very tragic part of history, it's not good. It's too flippant, and no publisher would greenlight that clash of tones. It's discordant at best and insulting at worst. As a ghost story, this failed because it just wasn't scary, and honestly, it didn't need to be a ghost story. Spoilers, by the way. But as I implied earlier, the ghost elements have nothing to do with the finale. You could have taken out the ghost elements entirely and just written a mystery thriller, and it probably would have worked better. Or else made the ghost elements a psychological aspect wrapped up in Sadie's grief, or framed it as a way of her dealing with the loss of her mother. But as they were just a bit pointless. As a mystery thriller, it wasn't a very satisfying book because there were too many elements brought in that went nowhere. A lot of these, yes, were some of the ghost elements, like the ghost boy at the train station or the weird old lady on the beach. What was the point of them? And the pipe! There was a cool pipe they found, and it was implied to be Matthew Hopkins,
the Witchfinder General.
Though how no one else found it before, considering it had been missing for 500 years, and Sadie found it by tripping up in a flower bed. If it's that near the surface, shouldn't it have been found by now? Anyway, this pipe has an evil aura, and this guy called Felix Knight blows it, and he basically pulls a golem. It's a bit weird. And I was all, oh snap, has he summoned the ghost of Matthew Hopkins?
The Witchfinder General.
Is it going to possess him? Is he going to go on a witch hunting spree? Is he going to try and burn Sadie? Nope. The story just kind of forgets about it until the end, and then Sadie destroys it. And she doesn't even destroy it right. The pipe is straight out of "Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad," by M.R. James, a very famous ghost story, where the pipe is blown and it awakens a malevolent force, and they get rid of the pipe by throwing it back into the ocean. And Sadie, on a sea cliff, gets this pipe, this evil pipe, which the author explicitly mentions is based on the M.R. James ghost story, and she burns it. The ocean is right there, and you had this ghost story gift wrapped, and you couldn't even do that right? It would be more thematic with the witches too, as they keep talking about the dunking test and how many innocents drowned or were hanged as opposed to being burned, and then you burn the pipe instead of drowning it? Either way, the pipe was pointless. Cool, but a huge letdown. Anyway, back to the point. It was just one of many elements that went nowhere, like the moths and the mediums and the research into witches that had nothing to do with anything in the end. It was just, what was the point of all of it? So by the time you got to the end, you just sort of felt frustrated and a bit cheated. And the ending itself was stupid anyway, so it would have been far more sensible for this to have been some paranormal malarkey. I would have preferred it. I mean, you've advertised this book as a modern-day ghost story. People reading it are obviously going to be open to some paranormal malarkey at the centre of everything. Now for the random things that annoyed me. Sadie's stepdad, Dan, has gone missing. He sodded off and didn't even come back for the funeral of Sadie's mother. And Sadie is angry, but she doesn't seem concerned at all. This is especially strange when it transpires that Dan has some mental health issues. So why isn't she concerned? A nurse then has Sadie steal some of Dan's medication. Why? His details would be on record somewhere. A nurse wouldn't ask you to steal something. It turns out that Dan's medication has been swapped. Why? There was a reason, but it was so stupid I can't remember it. Either way, how did he not notice? You'd noticed your pills had miraculously changed appearance. Turns out, when not on his pills, Dan's depression manifests as delusion. The nurse suggests getting the police involved, and Sadie says, no. What? A depressed, possibly delusional man has been missing for weeks, and you don't want to get the police involved? Due to reasons I won't go into, Sadie's mum changed Sadie's name when she was little to hide her from the plot. Not just changed completely. Changed completely her name from Mercy to Mercedes. Yeah, really different there. And now for some lines that made me laugh. The cartoonishly evil CEO politician guy called Cuts, first name, damned if I remember, is described as having dead eyes. In the next line, he's described as being very handsome. Dead eyes isn't exactly my idea of a dreamboat, but that might be because Sadie has a thing for robots. She also fancies Felix Knight, whose eyes, I am not joking, zoomed in on her face. What does that even mean? We had the immortal line, he took a hand and smoothed it back through his hair, which just sort of sounds... Alex, come here. Is he just grabbing a hand and doing that? It's just, I don't... And this is beaten only in how much I laughed at the absurdity. By the line, Maggie's eyes blinked. I'm sorry. Do her eyes have eyes? I don't like it. I think Maggie's the real witch in this. It's just weirded me out. Just don't. It's not worth it. There are better ghost stories out there, better witch stories out there, and better mystery thrillers out there. So don't waste your time reading this subpar blend. Speaking of better mysteries...